Number 33 UCLA preview, plus injury news, some starting quarterbacks named, and other notes from across the country on Good Morning College Football. Hello and welcome to episode 83 of Good Morning College Football. From campus2canton.com, I am Nicholas Ian Allen of CFB Winning Edge and Campus to Canton. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are just 5 days now from the beginning of the 2024 college football season. Week 0 kicks off this Saturday. So a small sampling of matchups to get the season started, but couldn't be more excited as we are now in the final home stretch, ready to start playing actual college football games at the end of this week. So on that note, we are, of course, working our way, continuing through our preview series. It's going to be wrapping up very soon. Wanted to do the number 33 team in our team strength power rankings, UCLA, today. We'll have the number 34 team, Florida, in our power rankings on Wednesday. And then we will be transitioning to our full week 0 preview on Friday. So most weeks we will preview games probably a little bit earlier, maybe in the midweek show at campus2canton.com. If you're interested in our CFB Winning Edge projections week by week, they're always available in our team profiles. 2024 team profiles are available to the C2C Winning Edge and all 22 tier members at campus2canton.com. But we also talk about our projections on the CFP Winning Edge podcast, and we will on this show during the week on Good Morning College Football, but a little bit later in the week than they are officially released to our members at Campus to Canton. So as we started last year, those weekly projections for both the matchups, our point spread projections for all 3 models will be put in the Campus to Canton Discord in the C2C Winning Edge tier chat. Also, our stat projections for our player stat projections, those will be updated and put in those in that chat as well on the Discord each week. And those will both happen on Tuesdays. So Tuesday each week, you'll be available to see our game projections for projected point spreads, totals, all that good stuff, as well as our stat projections, all in the Campus to Canton Discord. So if you haven't already, if you're interested in that sort of thing, we hope that you'll consider a membership at campus2canton.com. Again, the C2C Winning Edge tier and the All 22 tier get access to those projections, but you can join Campus to Canton for as little as $2.99 per month and get access to a wide range of content written on the site, as well as tools, all sorts of data to get you ready here in the final stretch. If you're looking at a last minute college fantasy football league, if you're looking to do the waiver wire ads and drops and things like that once the season kicks off, those will also continue to be very helpful there. Still a little time if you're getting ready for your Campus to Canton League, your Debbie League, what have you. Campus to Canton is, of course, a great place to get all the information you're looking for to prepare for those as well. But then just, general college football also. And of course, thank you so much for tuning in today on the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. We very much appreciate if you were able to like this video, subscribe to the channel. That really helps a lot. And again, we'll be continuing to bring you a wide range of content, not just Good Morning College Football, but all the other great shows on the Campus to Canton network here on the Campus to Canton YouTube channel as well. So let's dig into a little bit of fall camp news before we get to that UCLA preview. And if you're here just to for us to discuss the Bruins, the news portion is generally taking the first 15 minutes or so of these previews. Today it might go a little quicker than that, because despite the fact that Saturday was a big day for scrimmages across the country. As most teams are transitioning, they don't play until week 1. They typically, use this last Saturday before week 0, about 2 weeks out from kickoff of their first game, to sort of turn the page and scrimmage for mostly the second time for most teams. Take a good look at maybe some young players, some quarterback or other position competitions, and then once the week changes over, starts prepping for that week 1 opponent specifically. So pretty busy weekend. The closer that we get to those games kicking off, it can be a little more difficult to get news from these scrimmages. Of course, there are beat reporters and team sites, all kinds of folks out there doing great work trying to track down as much information as possible. But in most cases, it's not that easy. There are some scrimmages that are open to the media, some that are open to the public, or sometimes it's a small media viewing window. Sometimes they might announce, a scrimmage or a practice or what have you is going to be open, and then sort of change direction later. That's actually what happened at UCLA on Saturday. Head coach DeShaun Foster said he wanted to not have another vanilla practice, wanted to sort of ramp up the intensity, and do some more focused work, it sounded like, looking ahead to the season. So sometimes things like that happen, and teams have to change direction a little bit, or the folks that cover these teams have to change direction a little bit and find information elsewhere. But a little bit of news did come out. Unfortunately, the perhaps biggest impact injury-wise, Louisville wide receiver Caullin Lacy, the transfer from South Alabama, came in with very high expectations, was going to be a starter for the Cards this year. Huge, productive numbers at South Alabama last season, where he was targeted 119 times for 91 catches, 1,316 yards and 7 touchdowns for the Jags last year. Early thoughts were maybe he would emerge as that top target for Louisville this year. A lot of the fall camp news was suggesting that perhaps Chris Bell seemed a little more likely. There's also some positive buzz about incoming transfer Ja'Cory Brooks from Alabama. Well, for at least the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season, Brooks and Bell are definitely going to be featured more than Caullin Lacy, who unfortunately suffered a broken collarbone and will be out for a couple of months for Louisville. If our records are correct, and I believe that they are, Lacy does have a redshirt season available to him. So perhaps, depending on how his recovery goes this season, if he's ahead of schedule, I'm sure Louisville will want him back as quickly as possible, and he'll be able to make an impact this season. But he's going to miss, the first 2 months of the season, September and October. Perhaps, they don't rush him back. Maybe he gets in 4 games in the regular season, preserves that redshirt year if he is, interested in coming back for a 5th season in college football. Lacy was a 2020 recruit and played as a true freshman in 2020. So it's possible that I might have misspoke there. So if he doesn't have a redshirt season, this is a little difficult sometimes to keep track of. Then perhaps he'll be, come in, play as much as he can, and then move on to his professional career. So we'll see if we can find out a little bit more information on that once the season is underway. But this is an impactful loss for Louisville. Wide receiver, there's talent, there's certainly potential in this Louisville offense, but Chris Bell was the only returning starter. Jaden Thompson sounds like he's likely to step in and take starter type reps. Jimmy Callaway returns as well. He's a senior. Maybe the influx of tight ends that Louisville brought in, including Mark Redmond, our projected starter, but also Isaiah Cummings, Jaleel Skinner. Maybe we'll see, the likelihood of playing multiple tight ends at the same time was already, I think, fairly high for Louisville, but maybe we'll see even more of that with Lacy not going to be fully available at the beginning of the season. So unfortunate news there coming out of Louisville, but perhaps some positive news, if not a little surprising in some cases. There were some quarterbacks named, primarily at a group of 5 schools that we came across, but late last week, or perhaps this was Saturday, Jake Garcia was named the starter at East Carolina. A little bit of a surprise, even though all reports, Stephen Igo does a great job covering the Pirates for the 247 site, Hoist the Colors. Sounded like Garcia and Caden Hauser, also a transfer from the Power 4 level. Jake Garcia spent last season at Missouri, Hauser at Michigan State. But Hauser, even though they were splitting, especially early on, when we got a little more detail, I believe, they were like rep for rep, and Hauser with the ones one day, Garcia with the ones the next day, and then flip flop. And so there was seemingly very little, if any, separation. But my understanding was Hauser maybe had just the slightest of leads because he was taking, he took the day one first team reps, and didn't really sound like anything of note or that we were aware of had happened to cause Garcia to be able to separate. However, coming out over the weekend, news that Garcia is going to get the start week 1 against Norfolk State, the FCS opponent there, where East Carolina is going to be a heavy favorite in that matchup. So assuming Garcia is going to play well, wouldn't be a surprise if Hauser gets some action also. But then certainly the degree of difficulty goes up a bit. Week 2 at Old Dominion. Also week 3 hosting Appalachian State. So back-to-back Sun Belt teams there, both of whom coming off of bowl season. App State definitely in the mix for among the Sun Belt favorites, and then at Liberty. So a really difficult, even though there are no Power 4 opponents in the non-conference schedule and the schedule at all for East Carolina this season, pretty difficult collection of non-conference matchups in those first 4 weeks of the season. So we'll see how Garcia does getting that starting nod for East Carolina, a team that I think really will have an opportunity to bounce back from 2-10 season, 1-7 in AAC play. East Carolina, I do think, has legitimate bowl hopes, and really upgraded at the quarterback position. Multiple starters who could, or multiple players who could be starters in this East Carolina offense. Elsewhere, Boise State. Just late last night, Sunday, the Broncos news came out. I believe Pete Thamel was among the first, but I think this was confirmed pretty quickly by local beat reporters and then Spencer Danielson, head coach of the Broncos, that Maddux Madsen, a real surprise, was named starting quarterback for the opener against Georgia Southern. Like at East Carolina, it had been a close competition, but I think until the last maybe week or so leading into this announcement, the general consensus, perhaps an assumption, but understandably so, I think, that Malachi Nelson, the 5-star transfer from USC, redshirt freshman, was expected to be the starter. Nelson had gotten a lot of positive buzz in interviews with local media. It sounded like early on in a lot of the reports was taking those first team reps. A lot of positive news coming out of the spring. But Madsen, let's not forget, was a player who had wrestled the starting job away from Talon Green, who transferred and very quickly won the job at Arkansas. So in the SEC, Green, there's a lot of high hopes for him and the Razorbacks this season, or that he's going to be able to step in. Bobby Petrino, the new offensive coordinator at Arkansas, very complimentary of Green in the spring and the fall. And Madsen played his way, into the starting job last season before going down with a season-ending injury, and then Green, returns to the top of the depth chart, leads the Broncos to Mountain West championship. But Madsen just wouldn't go away once he got fully healthy, just able to compete day in and day out, it sounds like, with Nelson. And by time a decision needed to be made ahead of that week 1 trip to Statesboro, sounds like Madsen had done enough to separate himself from Malachi Nelson. And so, there are thoughts that Nelson, will he transfer again? Right now, sounds like he's saying all the right things, and will continue to compete for this job. Would not surprise me if we see Nelson get some significant snaps, in the first month of the season. Much, different first game situation for Boise State than East Carolina. We do have the Broncos favored at Georgia Southern, but not by very much. And honestly, our projections, our individual player ratings, are much higher on Malachi Nelson, given his high recruiting rating from all the major sites. Madsen, relative unknown, you could say, in some ways on the recruiting trail before emerging there at Boise State as a legitimate contender for the starting job and eventually named starter in both the last couple of seasons. But much lower rated in terms of that recruiting rating when we adjust for experience and production. Madsen is, mid 70s in his overall player rating. It's not exactly the same as the College Football 25 EA Sports video game, but built with that in mind. So very similar in how you can view our player ratings compared to the video game if you're more familiar with it. But Malachi Nelson, is right around an 86, better than FBS average, again, based on that 5-star pedigree. And perhaps he was, don't want to label anyone overrated, but it does seem like, didn't play very much at USC, transferred out to a Group of 5 school. It's possible that, right now his 86 rating and the way that we calculate it, probably a little bit too high. It's also very possible that Maddux Madsen is underrated, because it sounds like he went out and beat Malachi Nelson for this job, beat out Talon Green, although very, very short term. I think only got 1 start last season before going down with injury after beating out Talon Green eventually. So that's a real possibility there. Perhaps Maddux Madsen should be low 80s, something like that in our player ratings. But as of right now, this move did hurt our Boise State power rating just a little bit. They're still the top rated team in the Mountain West, but down to 57th nationally, which little bit of a drop after moving from from Nelson to Madsen. But a lot of playmakers for Boise State. Ashton Jeanty, of course, the wide receiver group has gotten a lot of real positive buzz since the spring and into the fall. It's a very deep group. Latrell Caples had a huge scrimmage, it sounds like. The former 5-star Chris Marshall had an excellent spring. Haven't heard as much about him this fall, but the addition of Cam Camper, Austin Bolt's still there. Penstration has gotten a lot of buzz too. So with Madsen running this offense, still should be a Boise State team that looks like the team to beat in the Mountain West, and a very, very exciting offense potentially as well. At San Diego State, also in the Mountain West, Pete Thamel of ESPN reported that true freshman Danny O'Neill will get the nod over Florida State transfer AJ Duffy for the Aztecs. O'Neill, highly rated freshman recruit, especially for the Mountain West, had been committed to Sean Lewis, the new Aztecs head coach, when he was the offensive coordinator at Colorado. Followed Lewis to San Diego State. So a bit of a hand-picked option there. Duffy had come in as a former four-star, understandably expected to be the favorite coming into the season. But again, some of the sort of rumors and a little bit of activity behind the scenes. What we're hearing late last week or so sounded like O'Neill was really making a push for this job and ends up winning it. It sounds like so, at least against Texas A&M Commerce in week 1, prior to San Diego State hosting Oregon State in week 2. That true freshman Danny O'Neill is going to be the starter for the Aztecs. Speaking of Oregon State, there were some conflicting reports on Sunday about the quarterback situation in Corvallis. The one that got a lot of activity first, Kerry Eggers, described as the dean of Portland sports, tweeted out that sources, quoting here from that tweet, sources tell me that Ben Gulbranson is the likely starter for Beaver football's opener versus Idaho State on August 3rd or 31st, but promising redshirt freshman Gabari Johnson should see some playing time too and could win the starting job at some point through the season. Nick Daschel of the Oregonian, late Sunday, maybe even early Monday morning, depending on where you are, tweeted, "There's a rumor on social media saying Ben Gulbranson is OSU's likely 2024 starter and Johnson may get time. A source close to the program told me that is 100% inaccurate. No decision has been made on a starting quarterback." So this QB battle could go really in one of 3 different directions. Last week, we discussed briefly that it sounded like, based on the previous scrimmage, that Giovanni McCoy, the transfer from Idaho, maybe still had a slight lead in this battle. Ben Gulbranson, there has been sort of a steady drumbeat about him having a real shot to reclaim what was once his starting quarterback position. But also on the note of Johnson, it sounds like in most reports, we follow the sites at 247 and Rivals and the Oregonian Daschel as well. There's been a lot of excitement around big plays that Johnson has made, but sounds like maybe just whether it's grasping the full complement of the playbook. Also, he had a injury in the spring that for whatever reason seemed less likely that he was going to be able to get the nod, but did seem like maybe long term and high ceiling and big play ability and all that. Johnson certainly seemed like he was going to be a factor here, but I don't know. We'll see. The updates over the weekend indicated that McCoy had just as good, if not better, stats in the most recent media viewing periods and scrimmages and things like that. That all 3 of these quarterbacks are taking first team reps. So I don't know. It's quite possible that this report from Eggers turns out to be correct. It's also possible that it was premature. Daschel, I certainly trust his reporting, and these could be different sources. Who knows? I don't know all the details, but it sounds like as of right now, nothing official. Even though there was a report that Gulbranson had emerged as the likely starter. Maybe he will be, but I think perhaps might be just a little bit too early. A couple of other final notes before we turn to UCLA here. At Kent State, Devin Cargman is going to be the starting quarterback, again, according to Pete Thamel. That was a slight surprise. We'd previously projected Tommy Ulatowski for the Flashes to be the projected starter. And Marshall picked up a new quarterback on Sunday after previously losing Mitch Griffiths, the transfer from Wake Forest earlier in the year, who stepped away from football. North Texas transfer Stone Earl has joined the Thundering Herd. So might be a little late for him to factor in as a starter right away, but Marshall still in the market for a transfer quarterback, so we'll see how that ends up working out, and if Earl ends up getting some playing time this season. All right, getting ready to switch gears here, talk a little bit about the UCLA Bruins, who are 33rd in our projections as far as our team strength ratings go. But among the teams that we have discussed so far this season and in these top 33 ratings and ranking preview shows, UCLA has by far the most modest expectations. I think that's pretty fair. Florida coming up next will be in the same ballpark, perhaps, given their toughest schedule in the country. But UCLA, as of this morning, the regular season win total posted by DraftKings, just 5. There's, I think, understandably low expectations for the Bruins. The way last season and sort of the Chip Kelly era played out, just a little bit strange. You don't often see a Power 4 head coach in a top 25, top 35 type job in college football. Don't often resign and leave voluntarily to go take an offensive coordinator job elsewhere. And Kelly was pretty intent on doing that. It sounded like interviewed for a lot of NFL offensive coordinator jobs before eventually ending up at Ohio State. Just didn't really want to be a head coach anymore. The timing wasn't great. Tapping DeShaun Foster created, I think, a lot of positive energy at UCLA, getting somebody who really wanted to be there. Foster's been on staff for a long time, had actually left for a job in the NFL before getting this head coaching opportunity, but had been at UCLA for a long time, played there as well prior to his NFL career. And somebody with real long-term ties to the program, and again, wanted to be there, wanted this job. That's something that was pretty clear that Chip Kelly did not. So on the one hand, that's good for the program long-term. On the other, Foster is just a first-time head coach, and our way of incorporating that into the projections, we do have a head coach rating. We do give a generic rating to first-time head coaches, kind of a FBS average type deal. Just sort of plug that in until we learn how this team performs on the field. Our team performance ratings do drive our head coach ratings, and so there's a step down as far as moving from Chip Kelly, who certainly, the immediate success at UCLA was not there. It took a little while to kind of get things turned into more of a winning direction. Still a little bit falling short of expectations at times. But nevertheless, Chip Kelly, more proven as a head coach, more experienced, certainly. And DeShaun Foster, first time doing it. First time, he was running backs coach. So not saying you have to be a coordinator immediately to find success as a head coach. Dabo Swinney's a great example. Turned into the greatest era of Clemson football eventually after he had very limited play calling history in his background, if any at all, had been wide receivers coach. So it can work out, certainly. But there are usually some growing pains here and there, and the potential for DeShaun Foster to struggle a little bit early on with some of the non-football aspects is definitely part of it. However, my personal opinion is a lot of these other ranking systems, a lot of the maybe expectations out there, including this win total, I think in some ways are downgrading UCLA just a little bit too much. So that's just a little bit of a hunch. The schedule is very tough, number 5 in our strength of schedule rankings. So that's not necessarily a great situation for a first-time head coach to step into. A lot of unfamiliarity with the move to the Big Ten. But maybe this UCLA team has the potential to surprise some folks a little bit. We're definitely over. Spoiler alert: we're over the 5 wins. But how do other people see UCLA, or other projection systems, I should say? Because most people, aren't talking about UCLA. All the post-spring top 25s that we've referenced, no UCLA mentions, unless it's in the Ohio State blurb about Chip Kelly moving on, or the USC blurb with D'Anton Lynn, the defensive coordinator, who did such a remarkable job for the Bruins, moving across town to USC. So no mentions in any of those national media top 25s that we've referenced in a lot of our previews. But the projection systems that rank all 134 teams certainly have UCLA. Beta rank is the highest, with the Bruins at number 32, so only one spot higher than us. But there is someone out there, or is a projection system out there, a little bit higher on UCLA than ours. SP Plus, Bill Connolly and ESPN, have UCLA at number 37. ESPN's Football Power Index have the Bruins at number 40. The K-Ford ratings have UCLA 44th, and then Phil Steele's Power Poll has UCLA number 50. They're losing a former 5-star signee at quarterback, Dante Moore. Seemingly, at least on paper, a little bit of a hit at the quarterback position. But as David Hale of ESPN pointed out in his piece that, assigned tier rankings to all 134 FBS quarterbacks, where UCLA was in tier 14, among the lowest of any team that we've discussed, if not the lowest so far. Still, what Hale said about Garbers perhaps gives a little bit of reason for optimism, or at least not despair. He wrote here in the piece, Garbers had a brutal opener last year against Coastal Carolina and was quickly benched. But when he returned to action in week 8, he looked much improved. In the 5 games he started and finished, UCLA was 4-1. The lone loss to number 11 Arizona, throwing 10 touchdowns and just 1 pick. So if Ethan Garbers is entrenched as the starter, sounds like he is. Eric Bieniemy's the new offensive coordinator there at UCLA, so I think reason to be excited there. Considered for a long time, a head coaching candidate in the NFL, somebody who you would think is going to be able to come in and put together a very difficult offense to defend. Ethan Garbers gives some continuity, consistency at that quarterback position, has appeared in 26 games in his career, ranks relatively high in our quarterback ratings. He's an 89 as a player. On that note, I'm going to go ahead and present here our, share my screen, our 2024 team profiles for you. Go in just a little bit, zoom in here. UCLA 33rd in our team strength power rankings, as you can see, 8th in the Big Ten. So even though they're, knocking on the door of a top 25 ranking, still a lot of work to do with that very difficult Big Ten schedule. But a team that roster strength wise, a little lower, in the mid 40s overall, and on offense and defense. Last season played like a top 25 team, especially had a lot of success on the defensive side of the ball. Number 3 in defensive team performance, 16th against the pass, 12th against the run, but a lot of the individual statistics, very, very solid. 17th in scoring defense against FBS opponents only in the regular season only. Top 10 in both yards per play allowed and points per drive. That points per drive number coming from Brian Famo of bcftoys.com, where garbage time is filtered out there. UCLA was 9th in points per drive allowed last season. 24th in yards per pass attempt against, so limiting big plays through the air pretty well. 18th in success rate against, according to collegefootballdata.com, and number 10 nationally in CFB Data's EPA per play equivalent. They call it PPA. So the defense really, really carried the way for UCLA last season. Little bit unexpected for most, Chip Kelly coached teams, where he, of course, made a big name for himself as an offensive play caller early on, had a lot of great offenses at Oregon when he was head coach there, known for offensive innovation throughout his career. So Offensive numbers, a little bit disappointing. 92nd in scoring offense last season, 77th in yards per play, 82nd in points per drive, 75th in yards per pass attempt, 79th in success rate, and 85th in that EPA per play equivalent. But if you look on the margins, look at the net numbers, much better, more in the range of, that top 40 type team overall. 51st in scoring margin, 34th in net yards per play, 40th in net points per drive, 48th in net yards per pass attempt, 33rd in net success rate, and 38th in EPA margin. Taking a look at who's coming back and who's not, sharing our CFB Winning Edge returning production database. The Bruins 95th in overall returning production, and this number is adjusted for incoming transfers. So if we look at just raw returning production, who's coming back, who's not, that's it. UCLA would be 85th overall, 53rd on the offensive side of the ball, 110th defensively. The numbers, not much different, but a little bit worse. 95th overall, adjusted for transfers, 70th on the offensive side of the ball, 108th defensively. So 95th overall, 15th in the Big Ten. That helps explain a lot of the modest expectations for UCLA this season. There are several Big Ten teams who rank relatively high in returning production overall. But I think just, this is another element of the total, year of transition that we're seeing at UCLA, not just the coaching staff, not just changing conferences, not just the additional travel. That's going to really, increase for UCLA as it has to make trips across the country fairly consistently. But the roster and the turnover there, without a huge influx of incoming production, UCLA on the low end as far as a lot of these numbers go. Dante Moore was the leading passer last season, tied with Garbers for the team lead in touchdowns. Didn't take care of the football as well as Garbers did, at least as far as interceptions go. Moore had 9 picks last season. Also slightly worse in yards per pass attempt, a good bit worse in completion percentage. So again, Garbers, if he's firmly entrenched as the starter, that might end up being a good thing to just bring a little bit more consistency there, because Moore, of course, got plenty of playing time. Caullin Lacy also brought in quite a bit, mostly as a runner, but had some opportunities there as well. But it's going to be Garbers, at least to start this season, it sounds like, for UCLA. So perhaps, again, that could end up being a positive. As far as the rushing attack goes, losing Carson Steele early to the NFL is a bit of a loss, but he and TJ Harden pretty evenly shared the workload, very similar numbers. Harden is back with 827 yards, a team leading 8 touchdowns on the ground on 156 carries. So expecting Harden will have a heavier workload going into this season, but Anthony Adkins plays more of a fullback role, but running back Army transfer is back. Keegan Jones plays some, actually listed here as a wide receiver, but plays running back as well. He returns. Garbers, not as productive of a runner as Caullin Lacy, but not a statue, not a negative as far as rushing production goes. So be curious to see if he's going to be able to produce a little bit, add to that rushing attack that you expect is going to be sort of where UCLA leans with Bieniemy and with Foster now sort of the architects of that offense. Jalen Berger, kind of an interesting name. Transfer, played, started his career at Wisconsin, transferred to Michigan State, dealt with injuries. He is going to be in the mix, I think, as running back 2. It's taken a little while to get up to speed, fully healthy, and acclimated to being a late addition to that UCLA roster. But think that he's going to be in line for a decent amount of work as probably the number 2 running back, and certainly should be more productive than he was last season for the Spartans. The receiving core looks to be in decent shape. Top target Logan Loya is back. J. Michael Sturdivant is maybe the most the player with the highest ceiling long term there for UCLA. Also hearing some more buzz about the junior Titus Mokia Atimalala, who's been a spring standout in the past, but sounds like he's emerging as a real contributor, a potential starter even, maybe competing with Rico Flores Jr., the Notre Dame transfer, for that third spot in the starting lineup. The tight end position's been hit hard by injury. Hudson Habermel is going to be out for the year for UCLA. That leaves Maliki Matavao as the likely starter. He was the most productive receiving tight end last season for UCLA. Carson Ryan transferred out to Utah, but Bryce Pierre coming in as a transfer, likely to play some significant snaps as well for this UCLA offense. The offensive line loses two full-time starters. Duke Clemens out of eligibility. Bruno Fina transferred out. They do bring a full-time starter as a transfer in. Alani Makahele coming in helps offset those two losses, but three full-time starters return. Garrett DiGiorgio, and my apologies to anyone for mispronouncing a name, but dealing with a little bit of an injury so far in fall camp, and in the spring actually suffered an ankle injury. So keep an eye on his availability, but as I understand it, I think he's probably likely to be back and available this season. On the defensive side of the ball, again, a lot of turnover, a lot of players running out of eligibility, including leading tackler Darius Muasau, who was a productive pass rusher, but the most productive pass rusher in a big loss for UCLA, Liatu Latu, 64 pressures last season, 20 points, 12 sacks, big loss as far as creating pressure. The losses of Gabriel and Grayson Murphy as well. So that UCLA defense could really put pressure on the quarterback. That's going to be missed this season, losing players like that. But in decent shape as far as linebacker goes, with Kane Medrano coming back, Oladejo as well. In the secondary, lost some key players to transfer to UCLA. Up front, lost multiple impactful players on the defensive line. Carl Jones Jr., the Murphys, as well as Latu, all categorized here as defensive linemen, but more edge defenders. Did get Jay Toa back, and that was huge because Toa briefly in the spring entered the transfer portal, but returned quite quickly. And he's perhaps the best player on that UCLA defense. So getting him back, certainly something to build around. But on that note, how does this work for the season this year? Sharing the team profiles again. UCLA, as we said, 33rd in our power ratings, 45th in roster strength. So there's certainly room for improvement. This isn't the most talented team we've seen at UCLA, certainly not the most talented team in the Big Ten, but there are some areas where UCLA shows some strength. If we just look at our raw recruiting data, the average 247 sports composite rating on the offensive side of the ball, UCLA ranks 33rd, top 30 at the quarterback position, top 20 at wide receiver, top 40 on the offensive line. That's something you can really work on and build around. The running back room, kind of the low group there, 61st in average 247 composite rating, but that might be the strength of the offense. What we're expecting TJ Harden to be able to be, a productive runner in a full-time job there. Jalen Berger, if he steps up and it is healthy, I think that running back room should be a strength of this UCLA team. Defensively, a little bit lower in those raw numbers, but a real strength looks like in the secondary, top 15 in those raw talent numbers, and then defensive line and linebacker a little closer to FBS average, 59th and 49th respectively. But those numbers are pretty similar to our position strength rankings, where we adjust for experience and production. So the defensive line looks a little better on paper. The linebacker group looks a little bit better on paper. The secondary, not quite as good as that top 15 raw, ranking would indicate, but still a top 40 group on paper, but right around 40 on offense, on defense, and overall in our average position strength ratings, 40th nationally. Problem is, moving into the Big Ten, a lot of very talented teams, a lot of experienced teams as well, more like the 10th most talented roster in that new conference. So going to rely on a lot of transfers coming in, some pretty interesting names to me. You got some transfers from lower levels. There's a Division III transfers, an edge rusher, Luke Schuerman, who here, the way we calculate it, and we try not to go crazy when there are, players who are super productive at a lower level. We know it's going to be a bit of a transition moving up, but there's a lot of excitement of a player like Schuerman, who rates as a 97 in our player ratings just based on what he did on the field at Johns Hopkins prior to this. So curious to see how he works out. Jacob Busick as well, transferring in from, where is he? Navy, right? So UCLA, as they were with Chip Kelly, not afraid to take a flyer or go out and find a player who has maybe some measurables, has some production at a place that the strength of schedule, competition not as high, but see if it translates to the Power 4 level. But a lot of transfers are going to be making an impact, or expected to, in the secondary. 3 of our 5 projected starters are first-year transfers, 1 each at linebacker and on the defensive line, but then multiple edge defenders. Drew Tuzama's a late addition there for UCLA. He's well-traveled, had been at South Carolina recently, UAB also in his past, but it's going to be a mix between some experience, a couple of starters returning on the defensive line, linebacker and defensive back there with Kane Madrano and Jalen Davies, but then going to the transfer portal, trying to fill those holes fairly quickly. It might work, it might not. Our numbers are a little more positive. We have a projected win total of 6.16. That is our official projection that is going to be counted. Did we get it right? Did we get it wrong? We are on the over. Usually, we have a decent track record overall, or 60.4% on all FBS win total projections, dating back to 2021 when we started doing it this way for all FBS teams. We do a little bit better. I don't have the exact number, but a few percentage points higher when we see a difference of plus or minus 1 full win, which, if you remember, that DraftKings win total is 5, so we are over 1 win higher for UCLA, 6.16. But I understand why there's a lot of hesitation, and expectations are modest, because, again, top 5 strength of schedule, LSU in the non-conference, Oregon, Pac-12, former Pac-12 now, Big Ten rival there. Getting them early on is going to be tough, as well as Penn State, play USC as always. And then, some of these teams, maybe not the heaviest hitters in the Big Ten, but Indiana is going to be improved. Minnesota is going to be tough. Rutgers is kind of a buzzy dark horse team in the Big Ten this year. I even saw them as maybe a playoff contender. I'm not quite there, but I think Kirk Herbstreit said that, right? So a tougher Rutgers team, a Nebraska team that is looking to take a step forward. Iowa, consistently one of the best defenses in college football. Washington went to the national championship game last year. Much different Washington team, but going to be difficult there. So it's going to be tough for UCLA, especially early. If the Bruins don't start out 2-0 against Hawaii and then Indiana, which that game is we do have UCLA favored, but I think that's probably going to be pretty close to a toss-up because Kirk Cignetti knows what he's doing, and I think has that Indiana team believing already that it can be very competitive. So if UCLA is not 2-0 in those two, then things could go sideways if the Bruins end up going 0-3, as probably expected, in that next stretch of at LSU, home against Oregon, and at Penn State. That's one of the toughest 3-game stretches any team is going to face this season. With 2 of those games on the road, that's going to be very, very difficult for UCLA to win even one of those games. So 2-3 in the first 5 games is probably your most likely outcome. 1-4 is certainly possible. But then, from there, the rest of the schedule has winnable games, but they're also losable. I've seen some, I don't remember, I think this was, I don't know, one of those just sort of generic sites that put out some predictions and had UCLA as a 2-10 team. I don't think that's very likely at all, but it could happen, especially if that Indiana game doesn't turn out how you want. You get beat up in those LSU, Oregon, Penn State matchups back to back to back, and then lose a lot of coin flips. I mean, I think this UCLA team is going to be very competitive. I think it certainly can get to bowl eligibility. I'm not going to overreact to DeShaun Foster's Big Ten Media Day performance, where he kind of froze and didn't have a great opening statement for his new team there at UCLA. I think that every first-time head coach, especially at this level, you've never done it, it's difficult. There are going to be a few growing pains, but I don't see this season being a disaster for UCLA. I think that the Bruins will be competitive. I'm fairly optimistic that we're going to be on the right side of that win total projection. But you absolutely could see, especially if injuries hit, the depth is not great at UCLA at several positions. And then there are winnable games, especially in the second half of the Big Ten schedule, but there are a lot of losable games there as well. So it certainly could go sideways, and this UCLA team ends up as a 4-win team, maybe even a 3-win team. 2 wins, man, that seems really unlikely, but it is in the realm of possibility. So this is going to be a very interesting team to watch. It's going to be a team that, just because I root for our numbers, I'm going to be rooting for a bit. It seems like we're probably going to be on UCLA a lot week to week compared to the odds makers in the market. That would be my guess. But it's a pretty interesting team and certainly a program in transition. Very curious to see how it plays out in year 1 of the Big Ten. So that's going to do it for us today. Hope everyone has a great start to your week. We will be back on Wednesday for Florida preview. And then on Friday, we will have that week 0 preview. And then we'll start getting into the swing of things as far as the college football season kicking off, which it will do on Saturday. It's game week. So again, that's going to be it for us. Hope everyone has a wonderful Monday. We'll be back on Wednesday for Good Morning College Football. Until then, I'm Nicholas Ian Allen of CampusCanton.com and CFP Winning Edge. Take care.